Hello, friends. This is Paul, and I hope you're enjoying wandering through nature with me each week. Well, if you enjoy wandering through nature and you enjoy journaling those wanderings, in other words, writing down or drawing whatever you find out there on our adventures, well, I've got an awesome nature journal for you. Yeah, I have 3 different nature journals with 3 different covers on them. The insides are pretty much the same, lots of blank pages for you to write and draw all your experiences and your feelings while you're wandering through nature. The covers are different on each one of the 3. And I also, for the young at heart or the youngsters who wander through nature with you, I have a children's nature journal, which is a guided nature journal. Lots of pages filled with ideas and suggestions for adventures in nature. Maybe they want to go exploring nature at night, doing a bug night. Well, they can do that with my suggestions, and they can write everything down in their journal. And of course, I did leave some pages blank for the youngsters to actually fill them out. Where can you get these awesome journals? Well, they're available now on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon.com. Do a search for author Paul Faringer, and you'll find the Nature Wanderer journals. And I'm in the middle of creating some new ones, so keep an eye out and grab those journals while they're available. Have a great day and keep wandering through nature. Hello, friends. This is Paul, and that means this is the Nature Wanderer podcast. Good to see everyone back again today. I am today out in the wilds of my own backyard. It is friggin' cold out here, I'll say that. Yeah, we've had quite a cold spell that came through. It's been kind of a weird winter here this year. It's been kind of up and down temperatures. We'll get a thaw where everything melts and turns to mud, and the dogs drag all the mud in the house, of course. And then it will freeze up and we'll get some snow, and then it will thaw again, and we'll have green grass, and then it gets cold. Yeah, just back and forth winter. It's just been crazy this year. So we are officially into winter, so I guess I should expect living in Western New York to get snow and very, very, very cold weather. And today, well, last night it got down into the lower 20s, and right now it's up in the upper 20s. I think it's like 26, 27 degrees right now. So yeah, it is cold, slight breeze. Gonna try to stay out of the wind so that we don't get too much wind noise on the recording. And I wanted to I know I could be in the nice warm studio today, and I was actually going to record this in the studio, but my topic just didn't warrant being in the studio. No, it warranted being out in the weather, in the elements, staying nice and cold. And yeah, because I want to talk a little bit about something that really fascinates me. It's been fascinating me for years. I've done a lot of research on it. I've learned a lot of information about it, and it still just amazes me all the time when I come across this subject. And we're talking ice crystals today. If you're unfamiliar with ice crystals, if you live in a cold climate like I do, ice crystals are all around you. Whether they're in their beautiful state of forming these beautiful structures on plants, on inanimate objects, just about anywhere. It can be on the ground, and sometimes it comes in the form of snow. Snow is actually made up of ice crystals, icicles, the water on a small puddle. It has beautiful designs. I love seeing all the ice on the puddles and all the different formations that the ice makes. Well, this is what I want to talk about today, is ice crystals. Usually when we have a lot of kind of up and down temperatures, we get fog, and that's when we get a lot of the really neat designs of the ice crystals. And if you hear crunching in the background, I'm out here with my four-footed furry friends today. Yeah, both Xander and Rivia decided to come with me today. So we have got company out here, and they're sniffing everything out. I saw some fox tracks across the trail earlier. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's not fox tracks, no, we're going to talk about ice crystals and how wonderful they are. So I don't know if you've ever seen ice crystals growing off of a plant. I've seen them. One of my favorite forms of ice crystals, besides seeing them in the puddles, is when I see the ice crystals on, I don't know, maybe one of my shepherd's hooks or on one of the dead plants in my field, and it looks like the ice crystals are coming off of it kind of sideways. So they're growing almost sideways, which seems weird because we always think of things growing straight up. So it's really interesting to see these, and they're absolutely beautiful. Hopefully you've seen them. If you haven't seen that type of ice crystal, I'm sure you've seen it in a puddle of water. And if you live in the warm climate, lucky for you. I've reached that age where I want to go somewhere where it's warm in the winter. Yeah, I'm getting a little tired of the cold. So I'd like to find somewhere warm every winter. But if you live in a warm climate, don't shut the podcast off. Don't turn it off right now. It's still an interesting topic. And later on, I'm going to teach you how you can make ice crystals even if you live in some place where it's really, really, really warm. So a nice way to do it is just indoors, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So what are ice crystals, and how do they form? And we see these beautiful designs coming sideways off a plant. How does that happen? What's an ice crystal? Well, ice, as everyone knows, is formed from frozen water. What is water? Molecules. Okay, so we're getting into science here, a little bit of chemistry too, and so H2O, I'm sure you've heard it before. If you hadn't, get out from under the rock you've been living under. Everyone knows water is H2O, 2 parts hydrogen. I'm sorry, I'm watching my older dog. He's getting up there in years like me, and he's just laying down in the snow, just loving it. German Shepherd, thick fur, so it doesn't bother him as much, but he's just laying in the snow, eating the snow off the ground, rolling in it. But anyhow, back to the subject. H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. These atoms bond together to form a molecule. And this molecule of 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, okay, H2, hydrogen, 2 parts, oxygen, there's no number after that, so it's 1 part. That forms a molecule, forming ice. Okay, water. Getting ahead of myself here. So it's forming water. So a water molecule. Now, this water molecule, when it freezes, it forms ice. When does it freeze? Well, that's where we come into our temperatures. Celsius is so much easier to understand when you're talking about water and freezing. You see, with Celsius, 0 degrees, it's freezing. Anything above 0 is above freezing. Anything below 0 is freezing. With Fahrenheit, you're talking about 32 degrees. 32 degrees is the temperature that water freezes at. So anything below 32 degrees, the water will freeze. Anything above, it will be in a liquid state. So when water turns to a solid state, it's basically frozen. So that's the basics of what ice crystals are. Frozen water. Now, 400 years ago, I wasn't alive. I know I may seem old sometimes, but 400 years ago, there was an astronomer. His name was Johannes Kepler. I think that's how you pronounce it. Johannes Kepler, he started studying ice crystals. And he started studying how they were formed. And he started, learning more and more about these ice crystals. And it didn't really catch on, though. People really were just like, yeah, so what? I don't really care. It's pretty to look at. But he actually hypothesized that the crystals were made of subunits that were symmetrically combined together. So you have basically one molecule of ice and others start attaching to it. And that's what forms these crystals. Now, later on, I think it was in the 1800s, a guy named Wilson Bentley, he came into the picture, and he was actually a farmer up in Vermont. And as a hobby, he loved doing photography, but not just any photography. He actually loved to see the shapes and the design, the art in these ice crystals, the art in a snowflake. And so he started photographing. He built up special designed equipment to photograph ice crystals, to photograph snowflakes. And he actually had a collection of over 5,000 photos of all these different ice crystals. And as he's studying them with these pictures, more people, it started to be an art project almost, and people started taking notice of this. A lot of his pictures were published in magazines, books, and scientists started taking notice too, and they're like, hey, maybe this is something we should look at. Something that he realized through taking all these photos is that all of the ice crystals, all these snowflakes, ice crystals, everything that he was photographing was all six-sided. And they were very unique too. As the crystals were growing, different things were affecting their growth, making each one very unique. So I know I've always heard there's no two snowflakes that are alike. I've actually researched that, and I have found that they have discovered that there's a few snowflakes that they have found that are similar. Billions and billions of snowflakes. How can you check every single one? But they have photographed and discovered that there are some that are pretty much 99.9% exactly the same. But the way crystals are formed, it makes them look different because they're formed differently. I'll get into that in a minute here, though. So let's talk chemistry. So as I was saying, you've got water, which is H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Now, the molecular bonds, of the 2 hydrogen atoms. So you have one hydrogen atom, another hydrogen atom. They are, at an angle from each other. If you drew a line from one of the atoms to the nucleus up to the other atom nucleus of this molecule, there is a 104.5 degree angle. So that's going to, remember that because it's going to help this whole process of crystallization on 6 sides make more sense in a little while. The oxygen atom on the other side, however, that's attracting more electrons. So if you remember back to chemistry class, I was not a big fan of chemistry, either in high school or college. I took chemistry courses in college because I did environmental studies, and part of learning about the environment is learning about chemistry too. So anyhow, I wish I had paid more closer attention because I really enjoy chemistry now. I didn't back then. But these oxygen atoms have electrons going around them. So do the hydrogen atoms. But there's more electrons dancing around the oxygen atom. So what's happening is the electronic charges of this molecule are kind of lopsided, bipolar we'll call it. Okay, so you've got these bipolar molecules. Now, they're attracted to each other when the water freezes. So they're constantly moving around, and they don't hook up very often because they're always moving when they're in their liquid form. But as it gets cold, they slow down and they start attracting to each other and sticking to each other and bonding to each other, as we call it in chemistry. If you say sticking to it in chemistry, yeah, they're going to kick you out of the lab. So we're going to use the proper terminology here. They start bonding to each other. Now, as they're attracted to each other and they freeze, they form, because of this angle, this 104.5 degree angle, there's only certain ways that they can bond to each other. They start forming this hexagonal figure. What's a hexagon? Okay, 6 sides. And that's where you start getting the 6-sided crystal. Now, any new molecules, they don't just fit anywhere. They have to fit into the design in the proper way, always keeping that 6-sided shape of the crystal. So no matter how big this crystal gets, big snowflake, 6-sided. And that's because of the way the bonds are and that angle between the atoms. Okay? Hopefully I didn't get too confusing for you. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. I could go deeper into it, but I probably wouldn't understand it any more than you would. So that's the basics of it. You have all these molecules, frozen water molecules, trying to stick together, bond together, and as they're bonding together, they're forming crystals. The more they bond together, the more that keep being pulled in and bonding, the larger the crystals get. Okay? So the growth is actually determined by environmental factors such as temperature and humidity. The more moisture you have, the larger your crystal will get. Okay, because you have the water, the moisture freezing. And the moisture comes in different sources, like in the puddle. The puddle just doesn't suddenly freeze over. Okay, it starts at the edges usually and it starts working its way in, and that's because you have more and more of these crystals bonding together. Now, when you see crystals growing off the side of a plant, like I told you, that's one of my favorite ways to see crystals. Usually that is caused from like a fog or the humidity in the air. And there's usually a slight wind, kind of like there is today. And that'll cause these crystals to start growing, but the wind is pushing the molecules in one direction. So they start growing off of the one side of the plant, or whatever they're growing off of. Now, when you see this growing off of the side, they're called rime formations, R-I-M-E. And like I said, usually formed when you have the proper conditions, which is usually a fog of some sort. So if you have, the temperature is warm and it starts dropping and you get cold temperatures, that's when you start getting these formations growing off of the sides of things. Okay, the rime formations. Now you can also get these crystal formations in things like windows. What happens with a window, if you have poorly insulated windows, it will happen more often usually. You have warm temperatures on the inside of the house, and you have cold temperatures on the outside. So the window has cold on one side, warm on the other side of the glass. And what happens in that case is it's forming condensation. So the condensation caused by this warm and cold hitting each other will cause the moisture, the condensation is moisture, cause that moisture to start freezing, forming crystals. Now, I love seeing the crystals on the window because just like the crystals on the plants, they look so different. It's almost like art. I love art. I love seeing beautiful paintings. I love seeing my favorite type of art, nature. Yeah, nature is great at forming art. Well, when you see the crystal formations on the window, maybe it's just in one corner, maybe it's on part of the window, maybe the whole window is frozen over and formed crystals. But the designs look different, and it's just amazing to see the different designs. I've actually done photographs of a lot of different crystal designs. I should keep them in a database together and put them online. Maybe I'll try to do that sometime. But anyhow, the designs are different because of a few things. First of all, residue on the window, dust, scratches, maybe cleaning product residue is left behind. All these things can cause the crystals to form differently. So they'll make the pattern different as well. Now, I want to talk, if we're talking crystals, we have to talk about snowflakes. Yeah, snowflakes are another one that basically it is a crystal. Okay, it's just large crystals that keep gathering together. Now, of course, they are formed up in the sky, up in the clouds. And when you have water droplets up in the sky, they freeze. So the water may be coming down from the clouds, may form in the cloud as well. So you have these water droplets that are forming, and as they're falling out of the sky, they attach themselves to either pollen or a dust particle, and that allows the crystal to start forming off of that imperfection in the water. So the crystal will actually form off of that pollen or dust particle. Now, as it starts going down through the sky, more water droplets start to attach themselves, and it starts growing larger and larger, forming your snowflake. Now, as I was saying, snowflakes are not alike, and the reason is, most I should say, are not alike. Every snowflake is not different. I'm sure there's snowflakes. I've actually seen pictures of snowflakes that were the same, but not many. Not many. Most snowflakes are different. And the reason is because these droplets are taking different paths through the sky. Sometimes they are gathering more dust. Sometimes they are hitting different temperatures. Sometimes they're hitting different humidity levels. And that's why snowflakes are different. So sometimes you may have like a wet snow. It feels really wet and you can actually build a nice snowman out of it. Other times it's a really soft, flaky snow. When I did the Christmas bird count a couple weeks ago, the snow was really heavy and big flakes. Yet other times, like this morning, we had a slight snowfall and it was coming down real light snowfall. And the flakes were really small. So the reason that they're not the same is because they are taking different paths. So essentially a snowflake is a grouped ice crystal. So it's a bunch of ice crystals that form together, grew off of each other, six-sided, they have to be, and they formed the six-sided large crystal. And that's what a snowflake is, and they can be different sizes. I'm sure you've seen that. That's essentially what crystals are. And I said that even if you live in the southern states, you can do some experiments in your own home to see and make crystals. And you can do this too, in cold climate as well. A couple of these experiments I'm going to talk about you have to do in cold climate because you do them outside. And I'm going to get to those in a minute here. I'm actually going to head inside because it is so cold out here. My hands are freezing and I want to go in and warm up a little bit. So I'm going to continue this in the studio. So I'll see you in for me it's going to be a few minutes. For you it's going to be like no time at all. Okay, fellow nature wanderers, I'm back. I'm in the studio where it's nice and toasty warm. Yeah, I apologize for that, but if you recall from my winter hiking safety, I always say if you feel like you're getting cold, get somewhere where it's warm. And I was dressed for the weather. My gloves, I actually had 2 layers of gloves on. It's always dress in layers, but my hands were really starting to get cold. I have my notes on my phone, and I was holding my phone the whole time. And like I said, there is a breeze. So even though it was about 20, I think it's 27 degrees out right now, the wind was making it much colder. So we had quite a wind chill, and I was starting to feel the cold in my fingers. And that's why I know it's time to go inside. So I'm going to finish this up here in the studio. And I was pretty much done talking about ice crystals, but I want to get to the experiments. Yeah, there's some pretty awesome experiments. I've done these myself, and it's pretty neat to watch them, see how crystals are formed, and I'll talk you through how to do each one of these. Now, the first one is one that I have not had success with, mostly because I haven't made my own bubble solution. Yeah, this is where we do frozen bubbles. So if you can make yourself a bubble solution, I've done it with the type that you buy in the store, and I must have had a really bad brand, but there is a formula for making your own bubble solution. If you use 1 tablespoon of dish soap, liquid dish soap, 1 tablespoon corn syrup, and that's the trick apparently. I'm going to try this myself, and 9 tablespoons of water. Pretty simple. So 9 tablespoons water, 1 tablespoon corn syrup, and 1 tablespoon dish soap. Mix it all together, and then you can form bubbles. Now, if you don't have a bubble wand, that's all right. Use a straw. Use a drinking straw. Don't drink the solution. Yuck. Use the drinking straw. Dip it into the bubble solution. Get it nice and wet, full of bubble solution. Take it out and blow a bubble. Test it inside first. If it works, great. Take it outside and start blowing bubbles on a nice cold day. If you do this when it's too warm, above freezing, it's not going to do much. The ideal conditions, I really hate to say this, me coming in 27-degree temperatures, but the ideal conditions is anything below 20 degrees. Okay, 20 degrees, things freeze very quickly, very rapidly. The colder, the better. So it freezes very quickly. So if you take these frozen bubble solutions, go outside, blow a bubble, and wait. And you're going to start noticing the crystals forming on the bubbles. If you do a Google search for frozen bubbles, there's a lot of pictures on the internet of these, and they're absolutely beautiful, these bubbles. I have had success once with it, but the bubble didn't last long. It popped very quickly. You don't want to make the bubbles too big because they will either float away or they pop. So keep the bubbles fairly small. Now, the second experiment is what I like to call the frozen boiling water. This is actually a big thing on Twitter, I think it was, many years ago, where everyone was trying to do this. Now, I want to talk safety first. Okay, remember, you're dealing with hot water in this one. So dealing with hot water, boiling water, you don't want to throw it towards someone. You want to make sure it's a nice calm day with no wind or very little wind, and make sure the wind is blowing the water away from you. What you're doing, once again, below 20 degrees you want, is you boil some water indoors. Get it so that's boiling, really hot. Now, boiling water is basically close to steam. You'll actually see some steam coming off of the water as it's boiling. You take that boiling water, you put it in a thermos. Use a thermos. You don't want to just put it in a glass because you'll burn your hand on it. Put it in a thermos, put your gloves on, your hats, your coat, go outside, and make sure the wind is away from you again, and you throw this thermos. Well, you don't throw the thermos. Let me rephrase that. You throw the water into the air. Hold on to the thermos, and you just throw it over your head in the air, and none of it's going to touch the ground. If you did this right, none of it will touch the ground. You see, the steam is the water droplets trying to separate. they're so active from getting so hot that they're trying to separate from each other, and therefore they get very small. So the steam is water that's getting very small, which small things will freeze much quicker, especially water. So these little droplets, these miniature droplets, are freezing almost instantly when you throw it in the air. So it forms this cloud of crystals around you. It's really fast. I've done this dozens of times, and it still fascinates me. It's really fun to watch. Now, the third experiment, this one actually has 2 experiments involved, but you're going to prepare for both experiments in the same way at the same time. So here you're going to grab some purified water. It has to be purified. If you have any imperfections in this water, any dirt, any chemicals, any impurities, the crystals are going to form as it's freezing because, once again, they're forming off of a nucleus. Crystals form off of a nucleus. And so they're going to be forming off of that nucleus if the water is not pure. If you can get purified water, great. I like to use, and they're not paying me anything for promoting them, but the Fiji water is supposedly very pure water, and that's what I usually use, and it works great. So grab a couple of these square bottled Fiji waters, and then, yes, I did say a couple. Grab 2 bottles, stick them in your freezer. Don't be burying them down somewhere. You want them undisturbed for a long period of time. So you take these 2 bottles, don't open them up, make sure they're completely sealed, put them in the freezer, and leave them totally undisturbed. Don't be opening and closing the freezer, getting out dinner. No, just keep them in there undisturbed for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Where they came up with that number, I don't know, but someone came up with that number of 2 hours and 15 minutes. Set a timer for it. If you go a little over or a little under, it's not a big deal. But you want the water to freeze, and that's why you need this time span. You want it to freeze to a certain amount of time. But if you go too long, you have more of a chance of it starting to form the crystals in the water while it's trying to freeze. Okay, so you've got the purified water in there. It's undisturbed for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Now, what's going to happen is what we call nucleation. I've been talking about it the whole podcast, how these crystals form around a nucleus. Okay, so they need something to grab onto to form off of, and that's the nucleus. Okay, experiment number 1. Take 1 bottle out while it's frozen. Be very careful. Don't disturb it while you're taking it out, so handle it very gently. You're going to notice it looks just like water. And actually, if you turn the bottle very slowly, if you turn it very slowly, you're going to see it's still liquid form. Now, wait a minute. It's been sitting in the freezer for 2 hours and 15 minutes. It should be frozen, right? Well, no, not yet, but it will. What I want you to do with that bottle is take it and you're going to jar it very quickly. You're going to actually smack it on your counter. Probably your kitchen counter. That's probably where your freezer is. So smack it on the kitchen counter and watch closely what happens. You can also take, I've done this before where I just took it and I just tweaked it with my finger on the side of the bottle. What you're doing when you do this is you're jarring the water, causing the molecules in there to start lining up, and they're creating their own nucleus and therefore forming crystals off of the nucleus. So wherever you hit the bottle, like if you slapped it on the counter, what's usually going to happen is it's going to start from the bottom and the crystals are going to start working their way up. If you tweak it with your finger, wherever you tweaked it with your finger is where the crystals are going to start forming, and then they start moving out from there. So it's really awesome to see. Now, the second experiment that you can do with your second bottle, now this one you're going to actually gently open up the cap of the bottle. So do it gently. You don't want to move the bottle around too much. You're going to grab a dish, maybe a cereal dish, a cereal bowl. You're going to grab this bowl, you're going to put it on your counter, and you're going to put an ice cube in the middle of the bowl. Or you can put a couple, it doesn't really matter. That's going to be your nucleus, that ice cube. And you're going to slowly and gently pour the water over the ice cube. And you're going to notice you're actually going to form crystallization coming up off of the ice cube. So you had that nucleus, and now you're forming a crystal off of it. So these are 4 really neat experiments that you can do right at your own house to build your own crystals. Now, experiment 3 and 4, the 2 with the purified water, those 2 you can do anywhere. You can actually be in the middle of Arizona in the desert, and you can take this in the middle of summer, and you can take those crystals outside. You just got to do it quickly, and you can make the bottle and form the crystals because you've had it in your freezer. So you can do this anywhere, even if you're in a warm climate. But these are some really interesting experiments that kind of show you how crystals are formed and how it actually works. So I hope you enjoyed learning about crystals today, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, make sure you rate and review the podcast. Invite your friends to join us. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and make your friends hit the subscribe button too. If you ever have any nature questions or ideas for future episodes, please feel free to drop me a DM on my Instagram page, which is at @TheNatureWanderer, underscores in between each of the words. Or you can go to my website at thenaturewanderer.com, and you can send me an email through there. Paul@naturewanderer.org is my email. You can support the podcast by joining my Patreon or my Ko-Fi page. The links for both those are in the show notes. And if you'd like to journal all your wanderings through nature, please check out my new nature journals, which can be purchased on Amazon. There are blank page journals for adults and guided journals for the youngsters. The link to purchase your journals are in the show notes. Show your support of the podcast and your love of nature by supporting a Nature Wanderer t-shirt or sweatshirt or other merch, which can be purchased at my store, which is also linked in the show notes. And this episode, I put in the show notes a link to a video that I made many years ago about crystals. And you actually get to see some of the crystals that formed in my yard. So it's kind of neat to see that. And above all, have a great week and keep exploring the nature around you. Did you know that plastic is made with oil, a fossil fuel that pollutes the environment? And did you know that only about 15% of all plastic is recycled into new products? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could live our lives without plastic so that we could stop harming the planet? Well, there's a company that wants to help you do just that. Life Without Plastic sells products that will reduce or eliminate your dependence on plastic. They have a large selection from toothbrushes to food storage containers to drinking straws, all plastic-free. And it's reasonably priced. So what are you waiting for? Check out all these great plastic-free products and help save the planet. Just click on the link in the show notes to find out more and to start your journey to being plastic-free.